The minds of the spiders in your house. Hello, YouTube. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be a spider, or questioned how intelligent they were? It's obviously not an easy thing to determine. Philosophers have argued forever about whether we can even know if anyone besides ourselves really exists and experiences the world. But we can look for certain indicators that there might be something going on in their little brains. When we do this, we're really looking at something called cognition. To understand this, I spoke to two researchers who have done work in this field, Dr. Ximena Nelson at the University of Canterbury in Christchurch, New Zealand, and Dr. Massimo de Agro at the University of Trento in Italy. And when I went back and reviewed those two interviews, it became really clear that I was in murky water the moment I set out to do this.
Right? Yes, I think you really you didn't do yourself a favor wanting to do cognition. Cognition is a big word.
It is really
big topic. And people inside the topic don't agree on what it is.
There's a lot of scope. I'm particularly interested in cognition, and I tend to study vision, although I'm interested in all sensory systems, really.
Right.
But my interest is in how sensory systems inform cognition, essentially.
Just so we have somewhere to start, one definition of cognition is adaptive information processing in the broadest sense, from gathering information through the senses to making decisions and performing functionally appropriate actions, regardless of the complexity of any internal representational processes that behavior might imply. So we're kind of talking about what might be going on in a spider's head, if anything at all, because for a long time, we didn't think there was much. Was spider cognition just not recognized at all? Was there kind of a belief that it just didn't exist, or what was the belief on that?
Yeah, I would say actually that for the general public, it still is that. Very much that spiders are little robots, right? They're just little automatons, Cartesian kind of mind and matter duality, whatever you want to call it. The spiders just don't have any kind of processing, which actually, if you stop to think about it, makes no sense at all, because of course they're processing, sensoring information, they're making decisions about what to attack, what to escape from. So everything is processing at some level. But it just doesn't really enter our consciousness to consider something that small, really, to have kind of processing powers. It might actually be a little bit surprising in terms of the level of decisions and the level of information that is being essentially used to make those decisions. We know a lot more about bees and whatever, and there's lots of documentaries about bees, and so maybe we might attribute bees to having some kind of interesting behaviors, which of course they do.
Right.
But we still don't do it to spiders by and large, for sure. We don't. And 30 years ago, scientists wouldn't have either.
Jumping spiders were the first spiders to give us a hint that there might be something more than a reflex or programmed responses going on. And this may make you wonder, are they intelligent? Turns out, that's a more complicated question than we might think.
Intelligence in biology is kind of a weird term to use, because in biology, when we talk about intelligence, we talk about the ability to solve survival problems. And in that sense, every animal is intelligent because every animal is perfectly adapted to its environment.
Okay.
When we use the term colloquially, we kind of mean clever. I think we kind of think about this ability to think over your thinking sometimes, which is in psychology is called metacognition.
When scientists started looking closely at spiders, they started to see some behaviors that looked pretty clever, which seemed unthinkable, given that they're an animal with a brain the size of a poppy seed. And that might be a good place to start. What do you think is the significance of brain size, if there's any at all?
How much in depth should I go with this answer? I think we can talk for hours about this. The answer is complicated. I'll go and you stop me. Fair?
Okay. Let's shoot for like a 2-minute answer, maybe.
Yes. It is true that there has been a history about trying to correlate brain size with cognitive capabilities. And this is because at the start of our research on cognition, we had this problem in our faces, right? We are humans, we talk to each other and we build civilizations. So we clearly have something going on. And of course, this has been attached also to kind of a sense of self-importance of the human race. We are the one that ask the questions, and we are the one that want to find the answer. And it's much better to tell yourself that you are special in some way, rather than telling yourself that you are not special in some way.
Right.
But I want to be fair, that there is something real about brain size correlate with cognition. And I think, especially in some of its measures, the overall brain size probably not particularly important. It's more about the brain to body ratio or the encephalization quotient, because when you get to the extremes, very big animals or very small animals, the brain size, it's all over the place. And also when we test a cognitive ability on an animal, the fact that it fails in the task, it does not necessarily mean that the animal is not capable of solving the task. It may mean that it can't solve the task, but it may mean that we didn't ask the question properly.
So, generally speaking, there does seem to be something to brain size, or the brain-to-body size ratio. But this isn't always the case.
But it kind of goes out of the window the moment we get out of mammals. And especially in invertebrates, in arthropods, in insects and spiders, because their evolution had to work with some constraints. Arthropods can't grow in size over a certain limit, and that's a physical limitation. At some point, a hollow tube, which is what an exoskeleton is, can sustain its own weight.
Right.
It needs to be solid. Okay. So if you can't grow, then you have to work with the space you have for your brain. And you still have to solve complex problems. In a constrained situation where you can't grow your brain, you will make your brain more efficient. And so make better circuits, make more clever circuits that have to solve the same problem, but with a lower number of neurons.
And this is what they refer to as the economy of design idea.
Yes, this is what they refer to, the economy of design idea. Yeah. So you have to solve the problem with less neurons.
The economy of design hypothesis can involve having sensory systems that filter out unnecessary information, or that convert information more efficiently. We can see this in jumping spiders. When a jumping spider sees a moving object with its lateral eyes, it usually turns to face it. But if we put the spider on a treadmill so it can't actually turn, it turns the treadmill the correct amount, even though the mark doesn't arrive in front of it. So rather than creating a feedback loop with the brain saying, keep turning until the mark is in front of your main eyes, which requires constant updating and a lot of processing, the lateral eyes are sending the information directly to the legs, saying, turn this amount, which is more efficient and requires less processing power. Dr. Nelson observed a vivid example of this while studying a jumping spider that seemed to be extremely choosy in what it hunted and ate. Well, and what species was that?
We call them MTs for mosquito terminators. It's called a Varca calicivora. So calicivora means eating mosquitoes. And it specialized on eating Anopheles mosquitoes, the vectors of malaria. But it also specialized on eating female Anopheles mosquitoes as opposed to male Anopheles mosquitoes, and specifically blood-fed female Anopheles mosquitoes, making it the pickiest animal on Earth. And it could tell the difference, and I did a whole bunch of 3D animation work to see how it was discriminating. And it was discriminating based on all sorts of things, but including like how feathery the antennae were, right? So females have got less feathery antennae than males, and so even if you gave it a skinny, not blood-fed female Anopheles, it preferred the skinny Anopheles to a male Anopheles, and it could tell the difference, which is kind of hard even for the human eye. It could tell the difference based on how feathery the antenna or fluffy the antenna were. And, so it's making these phenomenal discriminations. I mean, first of all, it tells you a lot about the visual resolution that they've got, because obviously with animation, there's no smell, there's no other thing, right? It's just it's 3D animation, so it's visual. And it's really clear cut, like it was really, really clear cut. And they could do this from when they emerged from the egg sac. So they're 1.5 millimeters long, these spiders. So obviously, if this tiny little baby spider is, if it's processing the whole gestalt or, the whole mosquito at the same time and the mosquito's moving or whatever, there's a lot going on there. So what I found with this 3D animation is that they're actually taking shortcuts. So they're actually essentially just going, okay, so is it Anopheles or not Anopheles, for example, because they're not interested in other mosquitoes. And Anopheles have a resting posture that's slightly kind of on an angle to the substrate, whereas most other mosquitoes are kind of parallel. So the first thing they do is look at angles. So if it's the right angle, okay, that's good. So check everything else out. And then, of course, I've got to work out whether it's a male or a female, whether it's blood-fed or not blood-fed. And they're looking at the shape for blood-fed because the female's round and gorged. And then they're working out whether or not it's a male or female, and it's specifically the antenna. So I was, for example, in my virtual mosquitoes, I was just swapping antenna from the body of a male to the body of a female, and they were very accurate bodies. If the female had the male antenna, they went to the other one, right? So they were looking at the antenna. So they were just using shortcuts to be able to work out, okay, yes, no, kind of almost binary questions,
right,
which might help them solve actually what ends up being a very difficult problem. So using these shortcuts, they're able to essentially fast track, if you like, the decision. To take that example to an extreme, we continued working with Avarca calicivora, and this time, instead of doing the 3D animation, realistic 3D animation stuff, we boiled it down to really abstract stimuli, which are essentially line drawings. And we had a line drawing of an Anopheles, a realistic drawing of a fly, which is like really uninteresting, a circle, and then literally stick figures of Anopheles. And then a fat stick or a fat oval with antenna for a blood-fed female. And they went for the blood-fed female stick figure, which was literally an oval with 3 sticks, over every other possible thing, including a very realistic drawing of a fly. And they hacked the stick figure and were really good. And it looked nothing, to our eye, looked nothing like an Anopheles. So then we essentially took the sticks away from the oval, and from the thin Anopheles, it was just sticks, and we basically just separated them and had them with a gap to see whether or not they had to process things holistically like a gestalt, or if they were just looking at elements, and if the elements had a certain configuration that was equal to the correct prey. We kept them in the same configuration that they would be in nature. So in other words, the oval was in that kind of orientation with, it doesn't really matter what orientation the oval is, because they can always be seeing an Anopheles from the side of a leaf. But the relative position of the abdomen with the legs, for example, is always going to be like that, right? So we kept that position, or we broke that position. And we found that they responded equally to a nice line drawing of an Anopheles, blood-fed female Anopheles mosquito, to the correct configuration but broken of the elements. And when you disjointed the angles, the relative angles, it all fell to pieces. Here they have really pared down a difficult decision by filtering out anything that's irrelevant. It's just the relative angles of a fat abdomen and its legs. And it doesn't even matter if they're attached, right?
That's the funniest part. It can.
Well, it kind of makes some sense. There could be a leaf, for example. If our visual system does the same thing. If, as I say to my students, like if we saw a tiger behind a picket fence and we couldn't recognize that it was a tiger behind a picket fence, we'd be dead, right? Because it's not slices of tiger that we're seeing, right? We're seeing one tiger, and that's exactly what they're doing. At the end of the day, that's exactly what they're doing.
There's another curious shortcut that jumping spider brains seem to take, and it's one that our brains take too. Look at this cloud of dots. It's not hard to see the general shape of a spider in this. Now look at this cloud and watch how it moves. This just looks like a mess of random dots. There's nothing recognizable in this. But look at this one. There's something funny about this cloud of dots and the way it moves. It doesn't look like any creature we're familiar with, but something about it looks alive. This is because of something called biological motion. The bodies of most creatures are made up of interconnected joints, and when those creatures move, the positions of the joints obviously move, but their distances to each other remain the same. In these dot clouds, the dots correspond to joints. So even if we take the parts of a spider, scramble them, make them move, as long as we keep the distances between the joints on each limb constant, it still registers in our minds as something lifelike.
The idea there is that even if you remove shapes, your brain can still see something. It can see the imaginary connection between the dots. Or even if it can't see the connection between the dots, like imagine the connection between the dots, the dynamic of motion, it's specific of things that are alive.
Right.
That's what it meant with biological motion. All living things move in a certain way. There is a dynamic that is specific to living things. And our brains have evolved to see some motion, even if we don't see the shape, and understand that that's something alive.
I don't know if you were ever a Star Wars fan.
Yes, of course.
But, okay, so I'm just thinking, if you imagine something like a car driving past in front of you, to the average person, that clearly registers as something relatively inanimate, right? It does not look like something that's alive. It's just one shape that's kind of rolling past. However, when you look at an AT-AT walker, which has exactly those connected joints,
it kind of looks alive.
It kind of looks like something alive, and this is probably exactly why.
Yes.
You may think that an AT-AT only looks alive because it's sort of shaped like a horse or other four-legged animal that we recognize. But the AT-ST looks sort of alive too, even though it's not really shaped like any animal we're familiar with. It moves with biological motion. And Dr. de Agro found that jumping spiders can tell the difference between biological motion and random motion.
And we saw that this jumping spider respond differently to these dot clouds that move like a spider, so biologically, and some dot clouds that move randomly, so the dots just scattered around. The scrambled one is quite special.
Right.
So in the normal spider, let's say, there is this kind of motion. And so even if you move this point and you move it at another point, at another place, the motion is still the same.
Yeah.
The structure is lost. You can't connect the dot anymore in your mind. But the dynamic is maintained.
Right.
And so you still feel that there is something alive, even if you can't really make out what it is. Spiders can't tell apart the scrambled from the biological, but they treat these two together similarly and differently from the random one.
Right.
So it really seems that it's about this liveliness, this perception of seeing something alive.
One more element of this is that jumping spider eyes don't all do the same thing. These eyes on the side here, the posterior lateral eyes, seem specialized in detecting motion, but they don't really classify it. They just alert the spider that something is there. These forward-facing eyes on the sides of the head are probably the most versatile. They see a bit more detail, and these are the ones that discriminate between biological motion and random motion. They're also most likely the primary rangefinders that the spider uses to target jumps, as their fields of view overlap to provide a good zone of binocular vision. These large eyes, the primary eyes, have a very narrow field of view but see in fantastic detail and can scan back and forth and are used for target identification. So this is one more way in which the jumping spider makes its brain more efficient. By spreading the load and dividing the labor, splitting up all of these different tasks between different sets of eyes that each act as a kind of filter, it's able to do more with less. This is a really cool discovery, but at this point you've been here for probably 10 minutes. You're clearly invested, so if you could take a second and hit the like button real quick. I know I often forget to do that when I'm absorbed in videos, but it helps out huge. I don't think you even need to pause. Thanks. Moving on. So far, we've talked mostly about sight and jumping spiders. The truth is, that's where most of our study on spider cognition has been done, but that raises another question. If vision can support this kind of cognition in spiders, might their other senses do that too? In contrast to jumping spiders, most spiders have very poor vision, but they have other senses that we don't have, and probably don't fully understand. They have receptors on their legs for chemoreception, which is something like smell or taste. They have structures called slit sensili on their exoskeletons that allow them to feel vibrations through the ground that are imperceptible to us. And they have sensory hairs called trichobothria, which can sense an air current moving as slowly as 1 millimeter per second, about the speed of the tip of the second hand on a wristwatch, enabling something like hearing, being able to sense motion at a distance. We have very little understanding of what kind of cognitive processing they might be doing with information from those sensory systems. Is there perhaps an analog to biological motion in the world of vibrations that spiders can sense through the ground? Or are there other aspects of their sensory system that we haven't really considered? Has there been much research done on the relationship between those senses and cognition? Like, it seems like there's been quite a bit done on visual systems and cognition, but what about these other ones?
No, very little. I mean, with the tactile hairs, for example, most of the research on tactile hairs has not been done on jumping spiders, it's been done on Cupianeus. And their work is very physiological, so they're really looking at proximate mechanisms and not really linking that up to cognition. And then there's other ones that have done stuff on web spiders, actually, sort of in that sense, the relationship between how much information the spider can glean from the web, viewing the web as an extension of the sensory system.
In 2021, Jian Zhu and a team in New York explored how orb weaving spiders use their webs as much more than just a net to catch prey. They discovered that the web is actually acting as a hyperacute acoustic sensor. Basically, it functions as a giant external eardrum, increasing the spider's sound-sensitive surface area to 10,000 times that of its own body. And the web was found to have better acoustic responsivity than all previously known eardrums in the animal kingdom. This allows these spiders to hear flying prey approaching long before it even arrives at the web. What gets even wilder is that the spider can adjust the tension on the radial threads of the web to both tune it to relevant frequencies like the wing beats of flying insects, and to filter out irrelevant information like wind. Once again, we have this economy of design thing going on, where the spider is using its body and extensions of its body to filter information, making its brain more efficient, allowing it to do more with a lot fewer neurons. Now all of this, the division of labor of jumping spider eyes, their ability to discern biological motion, orb weavers using the web as an acoustic antenna, this is all about sensory input and behavioral output. Where in all of this is cognition happening, if indeed it is at all?
I tend to be very conservative about my definition. What I call cognition is all of the operation that the brain does, transforming sensory input into behavioral output.
Okay.
So it's what in the middle. A reflex is something that goes directly from sensation, from the sensory processing to behavior. I touch fire, I retract my hand. That's
right.
A reflex. If there is an elaboration of the information that the sensory world gave to me, then that's cognition.
Okay.
Of course, this is a boring definition, of course, because now everything is cognition and every creature is cognitive. I can see the point already here. But when we go out of this definition, it's more about kind of the level of cognitive ability.
Right.
How many operations and how complex of operation are done between the sensory input and the output. Is the complex operations, is the problem solving, is the memory, is the spatial navigation and planning.
Right. Is there evidence of more complex function happening in spiders? Well, there's good evidence that they have a surprising capacity for memory. In 2015, Rafael Rodriguez and a team in Costa Rica studied a fascinating behavior seen in Nepheloclavipes, the golden orb web spider. These large spiders will often capture more than one prey insect and store it near the hub of their web in what scientists call a larder. So they put varying numbers and sizes of prey items into these spiders' webs and let the spiders wrap them, then gently chased the spiders back to their retreats at the edge of the web and quietly cut the prey items out of the web, then sat back and watched. Virtually all of the spiders returned to the hub, then started searching the web for their missing stuff. Interestingly, among the spiders that had been given only one prey item, the team found that doubling the mass of the prey made the spiders search 30 to 50% longer before giving up. But of the spiders that got more than one prey item, doubling the number of prey made the spiders search twice as long. So these spiders were remembering to some degree the general size of their larders, and they have some idea how many things are supposed to be there. So this is not just memory, but what appears to be the beginnings of basic numerical ability, or what scientists call a sense of numerosity. Of course, we've looked at this with jumping spiders too. Fiona Cross and Robert Jackson ran an experiment with Portia, a genus of jumping spider which we think might be one of the cleverest. They constructed a little course like this, put a spider here, and showed it a scene with between 1 and 6 prey items in a little window it could only get to from this point here. The thing is, getting here required climbing up this tower, during which time the spider would lose sight of the window. While the spider was climbing, the sneaky scientist changed what was in the window. If the number of prey items was the same, even if the arrangement was different, the spiders just carried on like nothing was wrong. But if the spider saw only one prey item in the first viewing, but 3 in the second, or 5 in the first and only 2 in the second, then it spent way longer sitting here examining the scene before it moved forward. This is called expectancy violation, and Cross and Jackson found that if either one of the scenes presented to the spider contained either 1 or 2 prey items, and was a different number from the other scene, the spider pondered longer because what it saw when it got here was not what it expected to see. If both scenes contained 3 or more, there was no delay. So this suggests that Portia can recognize 1 or 2 of something and have some kind of representation of that in its mind, with 3 or more just registering as many. Most of us can immediately recognize 5, maybe 6 dots without having to count them, but more than that just registers as several. This might be a similar cognitive mechanism. All of this leads us in a very particular direction, because memory, in its various forms, is the process by which we learn. And if spiders can remember things, then they can learn things too.
Sometimes we kind of see insects as these little machines that just act as small pre-programmed robots. But learning is actually something that is necessary for survival.
Right. Okay.
Animals that move need to learn things and need to change their behavior depending on previous experience. The moment you leave more than a couple of hours, it's highly beneficial to be able to learn.
The relationship between memory and learning can be a bit tricky though. As humans, we have what's called episodic memory, where we can recollect a certain episode or experience in our lives. For instance, we may remember taking driving lessons and learning how to drive. But when we're actually driving, are we thinking about those lessons?
But while you drive, you are not recollecting the memory. You are just employing a modified circuit in your brain that works automatically. You're not thinking anymore about how you acquire that information. You acquire some modifications into your body structure, your brain structure, that then act automatically onto your new motor pattern.
I can't think of a way we could possibly determine whether spiders possess episodic memory, but they definitely seem to learn in a way that's probably not so different from us.
Oh, there's no doubt they learn. I mean, just like anything, even innate behaviors or behaviors that you can perform, to completion the first time you ever perform them, even innate behaviors get better with time. So that's actually learning, right? And jumping spiders, you can see, I mean, they're useless when they start. The first time they try to hunt, they're pretty useless. They get better at it with time, and the hungrier they get. So it's clear that there's learning throughout the lifetime.
This seems like a fairly straightforward example, though, of a fairly instinctual behavior that they're just getting better at. What about more complex behaviors that spiders might have to learn that they're likely not born with? Again, we look to our clever girl, Portia.
Different species of Portia attack different types of spiders, and Portia are specialists on eating spiders. But some Portia attack web spiders, and they will strum. They'll use their legs and their pelts to strum the silk on the web to essentially lure the web spider toward them. And they've got to be really careful about that, because they've got to lure the spider toward them slowly, because if the web spider rushes out, then Portia's a goner, because the web spider can kill Portia. So Portia's got to essentially, anthropomorphizing it, pretend that it's a fly in the web that's not got a lot of energy. So the spider's just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to cruise on down and get this, completely risk-free prey. And Portia will change her strumming depending on the velocity at which that web spider is coming down. And they learn. So once they've worked out that web spider responds really well to this particular plucking routine, they will use that plucking routine in future with actually only single trial learning.
It's pretty remarkable that Portia can learn different strumming routines and different tactics for hunting different kinds of spiders. Of course, that's very relevant to the spider's natural world, so perhaps it doesn't seem so surprising. But could they be made to learn something that would have no application in their natural environment? Put another way, can you train a spider? Well, you sort of can, but it's tricky. The only reward that really works with them is food, but it's tricky to use that as a persuader.
They don't need to eat a lot.
Right.
And so they are hardly motivated. Here we are getting into the same topic of if they fail, are they not capable or are they unbothered by our problem? But, removed my experiments, it's pretty clear that this jumping spider can learn.
Some scientists have had some success with this. In Germany, Janis Liedtke and Jutta Schneider hid drops of sugar water, which spiders do like, believe it or not, behind little walls made of differently colored Lego bricks to see if they could learn which color was associated with the tasty snack. Not only were the spiders able to learn this fairly reliably, but when the researchers changed it up, the spiders learned the new color and location association fairly quickly.
Doing some color learning with Lego blocks.
I use Lego a lot in my videos.
Scientists love Lego.
It's great stuff. So it can be done, but they really do seem to learn things that are relevant to their lives a lot more quickly. And that might sound familiar to many parents out there who have heard their 12-year-old complain, "When am I ever going to use this?" when it's math homework time, while that same 12-year-old can spit out Pokemon stats like they've written a thesis on the topic.
But there are predispositions, there are biases that are adaptive. I mean, you can get train animals to associate two things, but they're much more readily associated if they're biologically relevant. So, you might get 2 trial learning for something that's biologically relevant. It might be 15 trial learning if it's like something that's completely irrelevant and makes no sense,
Again, we focused on jumping spiders in our research, but evidence of learning goes well beyond that. In 1962, S.M. Bayes did some experiments with Araneus diadematus, the cross orb weaver. He was able to teach them to associate a tasty prey item with a certain note from a tuning fork, and a bad-tasting prey item with a different note. So, while jumping spiders may get all the recognition for their cleverness, other spiders have it too. We see fascinating examples of cognitive function when we examine how spiders move through their habitat. Some ground hunting spiders, like wolf spiders and huntsman spiders, are believed to largely use a phenomenon called path integration to navigate through their world. Rather than creating a cognitive map, sort of a picture or a representation in your mind where things are in space, path integration is essentially keeping track of where you are relative to home base by estimating how far you've gone and in what direction, even if you're not going in a straight line.
Instead, path integration doesn't require a map to be formed. It just requires for you to hold a sense of the direction where home is plus how far you are.
Right.
So it's just two numbers.
Okay.
The map is a matrix.
Right. Okay.
And so in terms of cognitive complexity, path integration is lower in complexity than a cognitive map.
Okay.
But if you ask me, it's higher in intelligence, if we can use the term, but it's more efficient. We're going back to the same discourse as before, right? If you can solve the problem with a simpler process,
right,
it's fine.
Yeah.
It works. Why having to go the extra mile if you don't have to?
Yeah. Some spiders use the polarization of light in the sky to determine what direction they're pointing. As for determining how far they've gone, there are two likely mechanisms. Proprioception, which is just being able to perceive the movements your own body is making, and optic flow, visually watching your immediate surroundings move past you and estimating how far you've gone. This is sort of like walking around in the woods with a compass and counting your own steps as you go, changing direction many times, then expecting to be able to walk in a straight line right back to where you started. This doesn't seem to be all that well understood in spiders yet. Some others use visual cues, but even that we don't fully understand. Leucorchestris arenicola is a wandering spider in the Namib Desert, and its environment is sand dunes. Not a lot of landmarks that really stand out in that environment, and yet, not only does this spider navigate visually, which we know because if you cover its eyes it gets hopelessly lost, it somehow does this at night, even on moonless nights, memorizing snapshots of the horizon. Impossibly, this spider also holds the record for the longest registered paths, regularly traveling over 100 meters in a night, with one record of the spider traveling 810 meters in a night, in an irregular loop and ending up right back at its burrow. That's about half a mile, making this species, known as the dancing white lady spider, the best known navigator of all spiders. Once again, jumping spiders capture our attention when it comes to spatial cognition. Going back for a moment to where we talked about memory, we could see in this experiment that Portia here held in her memory the fact that there was some prey in this window, and roughly how many. But if we look at the experimental setup here, we notice something else. The path that the spider had to take to get to the prey involved two notable elements. One, at some point the spider has to lose sight of the prey. Two, the only available path to the prey actually involved the spider getting further away from it. This is called detouring, and it's actually the thing that made scientists first notice how clever jumping spiders are. For the clearest examples of this, they looked again to Portia, because unlike most other jumping spiders, Portia specializes in hunting other spiders, most of which would be more than capable of killing and eating Portia. And this requires approaching the prey from specific directions and angles, and that kind of planning is enabled specifically by sight.
Vision is immediate information, right? Speed of light. Doesn't get much more immediate than that. But it does allow you to assess things from a distance, so you don't have to get close enough to be able to touch it or whatever, so you can actually assess risk from a distance. So that allows you to plan, right? So that enables you to go, okay, well, I don't think I'm going to go that way. I'm going to go that way because that way, I can, for example, use that plant to get around and approach from behind or something, which other sensory systems typically can't. I mean, I see it every day in my experiments. I see it every day that the spiders are looking this way and they're looking that way and they're making a decision about which way to go. And that also it interacts with a habitat, right? I mean, if there's for example, if you're in a desert that's flat and there's nothing to hide behind, well, then there's no point in trying to assess any kind of different route or whatever approach to, for example, a potentially dangerous prey. And similarly, if it's really what I call cluttered, if it's like full forest and, you can only see 2 millimeters ahead of you because there's a leaf in front of you, well, that also doesn't allow for planning. But if you've got sort of intermediate levels, for example, of potential places to hide, I mean, think of lions that might be hunting For example, they might use the habitat to hide, right? And jumping spiders do the same thing. Only do that if their A is something to hide behind, and B, they can see something at a distance because it's not completely cluttered, right?
I put a question to both Dr. Nelson and Dr. de Agro that I've wondered for a long time. Is there something special about vision, sight, that lends itself to higher intelligence or cognition that makes jumping spiders smarter than other kinds? Or do we just recognize intelligence more easily in creatures with good vision because it's closer to our own experience of the world? Do you think that they're as intelligent as they are because they have a highly developed visual system? Or do you think they might not actually be that much smarter than other spiders? We just recognize their intelligence more readily because it more closely resembles our own. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, do you think other spiders might actually be just intelligent in a lot of ways we don't recognize?
I definitely think that. I think there's no doubt that other spiders are intelligent in ways that we don't recognize. But I also think that there's something quite unique about jumping spiders, and that's because of its visual system.
Is it possible that other animals or other spiders that don't have these elaborate visual systems, might they also have almost equally advanced cognition, but we just don't see it for what it is because it's so wildly different from our own experience? Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think that that sense of vision does sort of lend itself to the evolution of a higher level of cognition?
I kind of think is a bias in how we look at things. We tend to maximize our scientific effort on these species that are highly visual. Not fully, not all of the time, but it's not like we widely tested the cognitive abilities of black widows and we failed to find them, and then we had to go to jumping spiders. We didn't test other spider species or other spider families as extensively.
Right.
There could be something special about the vision, because vision is quite complex in itself, because it's multidimensional. It's thousands of photoreceptors taking hundreds of readings per second. It's a complex sense, and it's a massive investment that then you have to make sense of. When you think about pheromones, for example, and sexual selection, you perceive a pheromone and you know there's a female. When you have to use vision, there is no one-to-one trigger.
Right.
So I think there's something fascinating about vision that required some more computation. But we're also kind of biased in that. And I think that our best ability as humans is not seeing, it's communicating. And we can do that with our eyes. I can absolutely see a poorly visioned animal being very complex cognitively. Bats are quite of a good example.
Right.
Bats are heavily studied for their spatial navigation abilities. They live in a 3D world, which is very, very complicated. And we know that they perform amazing feats with their brain about locating sections. I'm not even talking about echolocation. So not about the senses. It's about understanding their place in space-time and how to reach other places, the planning part. So, I don't think that cognition is necessarily attached to vision. Okay. It's just that we recognize it the most.
While the eyes of jumping spiders have been best known for that keen vision, in 2022 those eyes gave us a glimpse of something remarkable. Dr. Daniela Rossler led a team that included Dr. de Agro, studying spiders as they appeared to be sleeping, suspended by a thread. When they observed this with spiderlings, which are somewhat transparent, they saw something we didn't expect: regular intervals of high-speed retinal movement, which very closely resembled what our eyes do when we're in REM sleep, when we dream. Of course, this sparks interest and immediately gets our attention. Could jumping spiders be dreaming?
We kind of immediately knew it would have had kind of the interest. It could have sparked the interest it did. Because, the moment you go and touch that topic, and I'm talking about hinting at the idea that there's dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
That it's something that people love, right?
Yeah, people do love it.
People love it, but not just, I don't mean just the public, and scientists as well. Because it kind of challenges your presuppositions and you see yourself in the animal. In the end, that's what moves the understanding of people of the internal worlds of animals. The moment you can relate. We knew that thing was relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Because moving your eyes is seeing in your sleep and it's dreaming. And when you know that's going to happen, you have to be very careful in what you want to say about what you observed. Because we didn't observe spiders dreaming. We observed spiders moving their eyes while they were not moving their body.
It's possible that these tiny animals are much more like us than we thought. In the case of some spiders, it might be difficult to see anything relatable. But in these curious, big-eyed little hunters, it's not so much of a stretch to think that they might have an internal world that's something like ours. There's a balance to be struck in how we approach them, and we need to be careful not to anthropomorphize them too much.
And as scientists and researchers, we care about facts.
Right.
So the danger of anthropomorphizing in science is getting the facts wrong. And to me, that's important. If we're talking about how we go about our daily lives, nothing will happen if we think wrongly about the spider's internal world. But for our understanding of the universe, putting our point of view into other animals will prevent us from understanding. Who knows the ramification of our understanding? Science is kind of mysterious in this sense. Who knows if in 400 years our understanding of spider dreaming wrongly will have prevented us to study the life-saving drug required to wake from the coma. I don't know. I'm making it up.
Right. Yeah.
I'm completely making it up. But the moment you abandon truth, the scientific process breaks down. I think that the danger, if we can call it danger, is to our pursuit of reality, of truth, and of facts.
At the same time, humanity has been making what is arguably the opposite mistake for hundreds or thousands of years.
Of course, there is also a danger in trying to treat them as different as possible. The opposite preconception, it's equally dangerous to truth. If you put your brain into other animals and you anthropomorphize them, maybe you miss the reality. But also if you are completely resistant to the idea that they could have things in common with you, then you will also lose some important steps. And we kind of had that problem for a long time in the history of biology. And in the history of society in general, it's kind of how humans work, in which whatever looks different from me must be different from me.
These animals can baffle our expectations. Only 30 years ago, nobody believed they were anything more than little automated machines. Now, they appear to be quite a bit more than that. And with such rich diversity among spiders, with more than 50,000 species worldwide displaying wondrous variety in their forms and ecology, they may potentially have a great deal to teach us about how animals, and perhaps humans, make sense of the world around them. When I look across my little arachnery, I have to wonder what each one of these little spiders is perceiving, what choices I don't know they're making, what dreams they might be having. The more we learn about how spiders collect and process sensory information, the more we can develop new ways to test new hypotheses about their abilities. And I'm excited to see what the future may bring as we find new and novel ways to observe them and the ways their little minds might work.
The history of psychology is full of this kind of hard, complicated questions done on many different animals. And the breakthroughs are always when a scientist finds a way to speak the animal language, if you understand what I mean, right? It's about finding the right experiment to let the animal shine, to show its abilities.
And that's what I've got for you today on spider cognition. Of course, a huge thank you to Dr. Nelson and Dr. de Agro for their time and expertise. If you liked this video or found it helpful, click that like button, which really helps me out. Subscribe for more spider goodness, and make sure you click the little bell so you're notified when I release new videos. And if you want to support this channel, check out my Patreon page, where you'll find extra content, behind the scenes stuff, research notes, and some of what goes into making these videos. Patreon is the very best way to support the channel, and a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters who have kept me going. I appreciate each and every one of you so much. This channel would not be possible without your support, and it means the world to me that it is something that's worth supporting to you. Thank you. And you can always head over to my Shopify store and pick up some channel merch there. The holidays are coming up, and these make a great gift for the elevator safety inspector or tax accountant or English teacher in your life. If you're a fan of the cheese test in my videos, these shirts may be for you. And all of that helps the channel as well. Of course, just watching and liking this video helps the channel, so if you've got this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've learned something about how spiders perceive their world, and I hope to see you next time. Cheers. So this is one more way in which the spider I finally fixed it. So this is one more way in which the jump